all correct.
Well, if you figure that out, you've figured out one of the great mysteries. So I'm going to mute myself and you can get your screen set. And I did greet everyone, but I knew that you'd want to greet them again.
Okay,
So,
now wait, I'm not a presenter. I've got to be a presenter.
yes, you
I
do.
can do it, and I've got it.
All right.
Okay.
Great.
Oh, if you ever see this, friends, just go the other way. Oh, goodness. Has the program started? Yes, we're on the air.
Yes, we are, but I didn't start recording.
Okay, well, I've started recording. And you can start recording now. That's fine. Oh, wow. Okay. Now, friends, what can I say except strange things happen? And I thought it would be unfortunate not to be able to discuss tonight's subject. Okay. And here
We
we are.
see you and you sound great.
Yeah, well, that's encouraging, and it was a close call. Joe and I will try to work out what may have happened, and they're always revising GoToWebinar in new forms, and it's difficult when they do that to come in as we should. Well, okay, first of all, first thing I want to do is welcome you. And I know there will be other people coming in, but I have to do this in the beginning. And so if you're ever one of those people that's coming in a little later, then you'll know I meant well by you. Okay, so Anna, hi. And Annette and Antoinette, Brennan, Catherine, Damien, Heike, and Helen, and Ishtar, and Johi, Julia. Okay. Karen, Kathy, Kirsten, Leah, Leslie. Thank you, Leslie, for helping us there. Loretta, Margot, and Michael, and Myrna. Risto, hi. Rose, Sam, Stacia, Stephen, and Stephen Sprung. Stephen Renneberg and Stephen Sprung. Okay. Tia, and Vicky, and Ivenica, and Veronica. Okay, welcome. And over here, Joe, and Tuya and I just trying to keep the program and the intent of the program together. All right. And people are joining us as we go. And I'm tomorrow morning. I just want to say, and Joe, if you'd be so kind and can do it, to put into the chat box the Science of Triangles meditation, which will be at 5 a.m. GMT. So not so far from right now. Kind of a short night's sleep, perhaps. And then, I do want to continue with the cosmic fire thing. I've been prevailed upon not to do 3 webinars in a day, which is my method. Anything worth doing is worth overdoing, right? Okay. So maybe on Friday we can pull that off, and maybe what will be done will be 1 week of discussion and 1 week of just giving you my commentary on the next part, and then discussion and commentary. We'll see how that works, okay? We'll see how that works. There's just so much to assimilate right now, given the 5.5 years we have, or a little more, before 2050, 25, and it's the I think it's also the coming in of the midway point of the 700-year seventh ray cycle. So it has to be very significant for manifestation of the hierarchy, their emergence, and then when everything is set in the five planetary centers, then the Christ at such a time as he alone knows, because it's not a clock time, I think it's a conditioned time. It balances what has been done within humanity with the energies available. So he will know. But then on that wave of expectation, as it tells us in the externalization of the hierarchy, he will appear. I think it's probably at least 100 years from now, and I think the Aquarian age will definitely have begun as it does in 2017, according to a letter from the Tibetan to the well-known psychologist Roberto Assagioli. So, we're all in this now, and kind of, and if we're really in it, and we care about these things, we'll be in it for hundreds of years. I mean, the Christ will be with us for almost 2,000 years. He and the Buddha cooperating. As usual, the Buddha will not be manifesting per se, but will remain in Shambhala, cooperating with the Christ. And then the two of them will take the completion of the seventh initiation before the planetary logos as the initiator, and go on their way to heights that we cannot fathom. Well, that's a whole, it's a whole nother subject as to the cosmic paths they will take after their term of duty with Earth's service is completed. And amazing thoughts. Of course, we're dealing with something quite fundamental in a sense. Excuse me. We're dealing with a change in our consciousness. We can be very sharp mentally. We can see how all of the things kind of fit together. And that's essential because we keep on learning. As I've said in the curriculum of relativity. But do we have the sense of oneness as we go about living in multiplicity? And I'm just going to repeat that because I think it's the foundation of everything we're doing. Do we have the sense of oneness as we continue to live in multiplicity? We can't help it. We're in the Mahamaya, and we are externalizations and emanations, we are rays, really, We are strands of the universal logos. Every one of us, a strand of the universal logos. And that universal logos is always different and always the same. So that's the thing. Can we be distinct in our apparent selves and yet identical to everyone and everything else? And that's what we're working on in this curriculum of being. There's just so many things to discuss and meditate upon, and it's kind of hard to know where the conversation or the meditation takes us. I make all kinds of plans, but the best laid plans of mice and men gang off to Gley, as Robert Burns told us. So anyway, I I sent this out to everybody, and now I just have a few things I'd like to have a meditation, and then go into some questions. Coming from your angle, and of course, I had to kind of go out here of the computer because it got in some kind of loop, and that loop made things impossible to go forward. Now, that's kind of a lesson, lesson for me anyway, that it is possible to get stuck in rotary motion. And no matter how hard you try to move forward, you're always thrown back into that same loop. And it was frustrating because I tried it, I don't know how many times, 5, 6, 7 times. And so with Joe's help and Tuya's help, managed to reappear. Now, let's see here. I'm just one more thing I want to get out of here if I can. I had all this ready, but you can imagine getting thrown at the last minute, not being able to get into the program. All right. Now let's have a little meditation, a little bit spontaneous in a way. We'll just use the silence a little bit to get that sense of everything drawing together into one thing. So this connects us all, I mean, we all are connected anyway. And more than that, we're the same thing anyway. But to feel it, that's the thing. And as emanations of the universal logos, which is essentially, that's such an important word, essentially the absolute deity, and if I may say, if it's possible, even more essentially the absoluteness, to get some kind of sense of being that emanation, we've been dropped down into confinement. Everything has gotten smaller and smaller. And our ring past not has shrunken tremendously. As the great being of this universe, I have to say this universe because there are infinitudinous of them. As the great being of this universe, our boundary is our own complete self-perception. You say, where does the universe end? Some people think it goes on forever, but if The universal logos is subject to time, and through its consciousness creates space. And if there is a great breath, no universe goes on forever. And there was a time at the beginning of this universe when emanation had not yet occurred. You know, all those Buddhist tankas and drawings and works of art, they show amazing structures of emanation. It all means something, you know. We came from a very big space in consciousness, and we've gone through voluntary self-reduction, even in a way coming into identity as a subatomic particle or a bubble in the koilon, or, you know, that particle physics takes us into a realm that is extremely shrunken compared to our true identity. And, you know, this is a planet of suffering. It's a planet of releasing sorrow and purifying pain. Think of those words. Releasing sorrow and purifying pain. But release does come, and what really is release? We can't be identified with our ring pass knot. You know, think of yourself as you usually do. You have a body, you have an aura, you have different vehicles, you have a causal body. Eventually, you'll have a large mental sheath, a large, expansive Buddhic vehicle, you know, the intuitional vehicle. You'll have a large will vehicle. That's the Atmic. And even larger will be the monadic reach, the monadic response. But all of those that we say we are, you know, I'm this, I'm this, I'm this, very different from the Brahmins, not this, not this, not this, not that. We keep on thinking we are what we see. And in a way we are, but I'll explain that. So if we drop away and fade into non-perceptibility, every ring pass knot I can't see the body anymore. I can't see my emotional body. I can't see my lower mind anymore. I keep on dropping my boundaries. I let them fade away into non-perceptibility. I even do that. When I say I, I'm just imagining I for all. Um, I do that for the triadal vehicles. I'm not limited by them. I drop them. And when it comes to that great vehicle of being, well, that gets destroyed too. That's a temple, the temple of Ezekiel, and I just drop the boundaries. But who am I to drop anything? I am the essential, and so are you, and so is everything. When all those things drop away, I sometimes tell to my unbelieving friends, I say, look, the body could fall on the floor and I'd still be standing here. So I drop the boundaries. All those things that make me distinct, apparently, from the universal logos. Just imagine yourself ascending into greater and greater spheres, each one of which you have to drop away and negate and forget and pay no attention to. Even if I was a planet or a solar logos, I'd have to drop away my identification with my solar logoic ring pass not. It's a limitation. And it just keeps going. We plunge deeply into relative tininess till at this moment we think we're some kind of human being, which in a way we are, in Maha Maya, the great illusion. But we're more than that, and we have to remind ourselves always that no ring pass not can hold us, no circumference, no boundary, no perimeter of a sphere can hold what we are. Until the day will come, again, forever, when the universal logos is the only being in the universe. There are no more emanations. We just have returned to our essential identity. But there's still a ring pass not, and that has to pop, fade, disappear in the ultimate universal pralaya also. And then comes our adventures as God in the super universal worlds. Seems far-fetched, but it's the essence of things. And right now, we just have to find the way to dissolve our limitation, or at least the perception of our limitation when we want to. There's absolutely no lower ego in this whatsoever. There's just one being. And while we go by our name and our body and our conditioning and where we live and who we know and who we're related to and all that. Yes, in Mahamaya, we do that. We just get this amazing realization that it's all one thing. Maybe even thing isn't a good word. In the divine Pimander, it starts right at the beginning with the only one thing. And Hermes Trismegistus, thrice great Hermes, is said to have been the author there, or at least some derivation from his earlier work. So our job is to remain humble in relativity. We don't try to make our little ego the king of the world or the queen of the world. We have a sense of proportion. There's nothing we can be but it anyway, so we have a sense of proportion, how to operate in relativity, and at the same time, we're learning how to infusive. See the one, be the one, feel the one, no matter how many parts and pieces we perceive, the one underlies all of them. And, it will come in various degrees of intensity. Sometimes you'll really know it, and other times you may be searching and you can't quite get it. That's okay. With practice, it will come. And then we will be that strange contradiction of a consciousness which functions in relativity and knows itself to be being. Isness is the great unifier. Just try to, your own way, whatever you want to do, just try to let try to activate infuception. It means it's a formless oneness uniting all apparent separation. You don't have to try to perceive differences. They're everywhere in the world of relativity. But just look around you, feel around you, listen around you. And find in all that difference, find the same. There has never been a variation in isness forever. There's a variation in how intensely it is perceived, but not in what it is. So open your heart wherever you want your imagination to go. And find that which obliterates difference. And I guess the very fact that you are perceiving anything at all shows you that all perceptions are the same, because they all are. They have this isness. They are this isness. The mere fact that they are registered and everything that's not registered shows that they are. This is isness. We're in Libra now. And what you learn about being in Libra is that everything is equal in isness. Now think about that. Everything is equal in isness. Everything. The good, the bad, the beautiful, the ugly. It doesn't make any difference. Equal, like Libra. I can look at the worst of the worst and the best of the best according to my range of perception, and they are equal in isness, vastly different in quality. So whatever you perceive, whether imaginatively or psychically or with your senses, strip away, for the sake of this exercise, all quality, and perceive or infusive only isness. That's what hits you. Of course, it's not really you, but the subject-object dualism is hard to get rid of, but you have this perceptual mechanism, and something within it allows the being of being, the identification as being. Being is isness. Spend some time every week or 5 minutes every day trying to infusive in this way, and let the isness of things strike you, not their quality. Oh, it's attractive, it's repulsive, it's beautiful, it's ugly, it's spiritual, it's mundane. None of that. And then maybe you can fulfill the old dictum to look in all directions and see only the same. Now, our desire body wants a lot of particular things. You know, we have goals. The whole world is driven mad by desire, and the Buddha knew it. For him, isness was suchness, or maybe an unsuchness. And our desire body and the mind will say, I want this, I want that, I want to do this, I want to do that, I don't want this, I don't want that. All that is still in the realm of relativity. Relativity, I call it. But when you go out on a walk, or even just sitting still in your house or wherever, and you go on a little isness adventure, then the only thing you want is isness. And even the wanting of it gets in the way. And this will lead, eventually, let me use some funny words here, to the beingness of the utter otherness. That's after the universe dissolves yet again. To the beingness of the utter otherness. It is, I try to think of it as absolutely infinite or absolutely utter beingness, to the point that it absolutely is any possible division in absolute infinity. Now, we always have to be on our way to the return, even though we've never left. Now, this is very radical, going to the root. Not everybody wants to do that, because their desire body wants this, doesn't want that, wants this, doesn't want that. We have to, for some time, in no time, eliminate those wants and just live in suchness, non-suchness, beingness, utterness, isness, which infuception reveals. It's an adventure. While we're working out yet another in an infinite series of archetypes under self-chosen limitation, self-chosen finitude. The infinite must be able to become finite, otherwise it can't be infinite. So, every universe has a theme in relativity, and we are part of it, but it's not bad, it's very good to remind ourselves of what we really are. And then all I can say is something starts to happen which overcomes the great heresy of separateness or separativeness. A heresy is wrong thought, right? So we all labor under, at first anyway, under this great heresy of separateness. And that's all the pain and all the fear and all the negativity, which holds things apart, because we're laboring under that illusion of separateness. So it's worth 5 minutes a day to rediscover, or at least be on the way to rediscovery, of the great essence that we are, and which is everybody else and everything else, and which is the only one no thing. I could say thing, but then I've concretized it. It's the only one no thing. Utterly utter. We can't yet register the utter utterness of that, as they say in the Vedanta, of that. But we are that. And we'll be fully reminded when this adventure into finiteness that we call a universe is over again. So, 1 Om. Okay, friends, so, one thing leads to another, and it's the simplest thing in the world. Totally simple. You don't have to worry about it's just beyond relativity. Sure, we have to ask, did I make a success of this incarnation? Did I fulfill the word? Is the secret of my name inwardly coming through? We're not let off, we're not excused from a thing in this finite world of relativity. At the same time, we get a sense of the background, which is always there forever, without variation, so absolutely utter that there's, it's just as far as you can go, which is kind of always farther. So, God is being absolutely infinite, and Spinoza had this, and there's a real example of the third and second ray together. Great philosopher, and I think he maybe, I don't know, just wrote only one book, maybe, The Ethics, and he took it all the way from God, the infinite, down to practical action in how we treat each other. A big task. He was a lens grinder, always trying to see sharper. He was Gemini Sagittarius. I think it was Sagittarius rising, Sun in Gemini, something like that. We just have to make the most of the energies that we are given. And if we really care to get to the bottom of things, we'll get to the top of things at the same time. And we can't ever give up at it because, it's so simple and so subtle that it's elusive. It's always escaping, But we've done it constantly. Every universe, every being has to redo this within the context of the universal archetype. There's a pattern for every universe, and we have to redo this thing, this coming home, regardless of what the pattern may be, and regardless of whether we're happy or sad or whatever we are, whether we think that life has treated us well or not, or whether we've succeeded or not, it doesn't make any difference. If you wake up to it, you have to do it. And then you have a dual curriculum, as I've often said. The curriculum of relativity, which study of the ageless wisdom will allow you to enter profoundly. And the curriculum of being, isness, absoluteness, which you can't help but be. It's just that it's hiding everywhere. And one day, enlightenment comes. And it comes in various grades, according to the initiations. The Tsongkhapa, wasn't that his name? I was trying to think of that the last time I talked. The great Tibetan sage. A fly, a housefly, that did it for him. One day he looked at a housefly in such a way, poof, there it was, that oneness. And he was, at his stage of a human being, receiving, I think, overshadowing from the Buddha, enlightened. He was enlightened. Now, I would say that, the first stage of enlightenment really occurs, well, you're on your way all the time, but at the third degree. That's part of the transfiguration. And you just keep going into greater and greater light. When you look at the enlightenment of the Buddha, that was not the third degree. He was already the head of the hierarchy for about 2,500 years, ever since the death of Krishna. They've been working together all that time. And the Buddha had the sixth degree at the time of his enlightenment, the sixth initiation. So there's all these, these different expressions of light that we call enlightenment. And at least let's get out of the illusion of time and space. I'll be dealing with that quite a bit as we go along. I'll try to show the relationship between a true point, which is dimensionless, and how the existence of the point means that time and space do not exist. Really, they exist actually, like Mahamaya, the big illusion. They're a great seeming. But if we can get rid of that first aspect of the great illusion, we're really on our way. And don't think you can't do it, because you've done it forever, literally forever. And if you're hitting hard times now, you have an infinitude of different conditions to compare with, and always there has been success. Always. The universe has dissolved into what is real. And you've been there all the time. I don't mean you, how you look now, or, the body and all the conditioning and all that. I mean the real you. You've been there forever. Every time. And you've succeeded every time. So maybe sometimes when we're feeling a little down, I think I felt a little down today, second rate, feeling sorry for myself or something, I have to remind myself, the graduate, all of us, as one, of infinite universes. Successful every time. Although, there's plenty of twists and tangles on the way there in the drama of relativity. And we have to do the best we can with that. I don't think God or the absolute, whatever it is, it just can't stay that way and be the absolute. It's got to enter into the finite, and that's why we have a universe. All right, now, I keep on saying, I know that was a fairly long meditation, and also, the question is, was it even a meditation? But at least gave us some things to think about. Is that before I get into too much more, and I'm always careful about how much I load on you or on myself, speaking in a relative sense, are there anything anyone would like to say or ask or note?
Roz has written in the question box.
Okay, I see a question right here. So, is the real you already enlightened? And, well, the real you, yeah, let's just say we're uncovering it. And it is not only enlightened, it is supreme. It is utterly utter. It just, all we're doing is basically, we are covering what we are in devolution and uncovering what we are in evolution. And you see, when we use a word like enlightened, it has a lot to do with the relative world, as if there are stages of enlightenment through initiation, and all of that is true in the relative world. Basically, what it means is you descend by degrees and you retract by degrees until you return to the essence that you are. But there's just, a funny old statement that God is not God unless he, she, it, whatever, can create the stone he cannot lift. So there's this plunge into finitude, becoming finite, apparently, because it's always really an impossibility. And what you really are is so utterly utter that it's the incomparable. Nothing can be compared with it. Not only can nothing be compared with it, but there's nothing to compare with it. And so we talk about words like enlightenment and all that, but what I'd like to say is that this is, that's in the relative world, okay? And we studied the ageless wisdom for that, because practically speaking, we have to work very hard to pass through these different stages of sensitivity which allow more and more of the essence to be recognized and to shine through us. But when we talk about ultimate enlightenment, I mean, first of all, look, we can't even, what is the sixth initiation that the Buddha and the Christ have taken? And the Buddha had this cosmic mental plane, enlightenment. But what do we do when we realize that the cosmic mental plane here is just a subplane on some kind of supercosmic physical plane, and on and on and on? There's such a progression in the world of relativity. That progression is necessary. Yes, it is. But it's not the essence of things. So we always are exactly what we are, forever and supreme. Obviously, no words can touch it. And we are also differentiated reduction into through self-choice. Now, we've got plenty to do right down here. Our planet could blow up here. We could have a ecological disaster. Humanity, as we know it, could be wiped out. Have to start all over again. We have our relative problems, and obviously we have to be sharp about fixing them and do what we can esoterically. At the same time, behind the scenes is what God really is, what we really are, what the Absolute really is. That is behind the scenes. And literally behind the scenes. The whole Mahamaya, great illusion, is a scene, nothing but a scene. It's an actuality. It's an illusion. It's a something to play with. Like DK says, when you get to be a master, and time and space become your playthings. And we're talking about much higher possibilities as well. It's all a game. It's all a drama. It's all a dance. It's all a play. It's all becoming. It's all a becoming while not becoming. I'll tell you have to get used to paradox. I've got to say that. Because in normal logic, paradox can't exist. Self-contradiction proves a fallacy. But in the world of deep occultism, if we don't have paradox, we don't have reality. Okay, so Roz, I don't know if I got close on that. But anyway, let's all head for the third initiation here, which is a modest form of enlightenment, even though to normal man it looks like a huge transfiguration, and it is. The Christ was repeated the transfiguration before his astonished disciples, and they all bowed before him, representing the etheric, physical, the astral, and the mental vehicles. Let's get those under our belt, so to speak. But meanwhile, lurking is reality, and none of this division is reality in form, although essentially it is. Okay, so Michael here, it is surprising how wise flies can be. Okay. Okay. When I was first learning astrology, a particularly large and sonorous fly landed on the textbook, showing I had a Pisces moon, not an Aquarius moon, as I had thought at the time. Perhaps they speak from the constellation Musca, which means fly, right? Okay, that's a good one. That's a very good one. And, of course, there is the synchronicity and this coordination of all parts of the whole to indicate revelation all the time if we could just wake up to it, you know. Let's just say the truth is declaring itself all the time, but it's a question of being awake to it. And, you know, we have a lot of worry about our relative form. You know, in the often stated question, what will become of me? Goodness, what will become of me? Well, nothing will ever become of you, because there is no becomingness that is real in this world of utter otherness. But plenty will become of us in the world of relativity. And that's why we have our interludes of finitude. That's what I call a universe, an interlude of finitude, even while remaining exactly what we are, okay? So just be alert, of course, and you were there. And it's just a question of synchronicity in this case, a so-called a-causal principle of connectedness. I think that's how Carl Jung defined that that term synchronicity. And then, you know, when you're on the seventh ray, a lot of seventh ray people, and I'm not saying you are, right? But I'm just saying, if you're on the seventh ray, you're always looking for omens. You're always looking for some signature of nature to confirm the meaning of what is happening. And I think that's how the Native Americans got their names. What was the moment of the birth, and what was, you know, three crows flying? A person could be called that. Or, you know, it could be called the eagle. You know, I mean, in synchronicity, we look for the moment. And it's always being dramatized before us. And astrology, of course, determines to a certain extent what presents itself to us as synchronous, occurring at the same time. Lots of good books have been written about this, but again, it just means staying sharp, staying alert, you know, avoiding self-pity and the other glamours that can, attack us apparently and blind us to the truth. Yeah. Well, you know, it's a great quest. It's we in the Moria Federation, we go as deep as we can. Master DK has provided us with so much, and Master Moria with so much, and, you know, KH is behind DK, and they give us the curriculum of the preparatory schools of the future, some of it anyway. And Moria is just here. I mean, he's strengthening us all the time. If we apply correctly to him, he said, I do not see any who may not approach. I just get chills when I think about that declaration, that he's there to help everybody if they will just approach. A higher power, a higher source of energy, and in the occult chain of helpfulness, one hand above, one hand below. You know how it is. You're getting help and you give help. And that concatenation of hands above and below, it tells the story. Are there any other questions or thoughts you'd like to review or bring up? And here's, okay, we got Raz, or is this a new one? No, we got that one. And, you know, don't worry about the words. You will you will find the words. The words, everybody has their own language, you know. What might be meaningful to me, I try to present to you because it's my way in, around, through. It may not mean too much to you, but then you'll come up with your own formula. That I'm recalling what DK says, that at the third degree, you know, towards which we are heading, the disciple has to come up with a mental formulation concerning his view of reality. And that's going to be a very individual project, and it's kind of linked to your building of the Antakarana, which you're going to do in your own way. Every Antakarana is unique, and yet they're all one approach, you know. The Antakarana, the inner organ, is the way of return, coming back along your emanative line. And I really like this picture because it gives the idea of the one splitting into the many, and the many coalescing again into the one. And of course, this is just a tiny little view of what's going on in this immense cosmos with its 10 dimensions. Now, you know, as to what are those dimensions, well, okay, you know, maybe there can be differences of opinion as to what are the dimensions, but we are certainly dealing right now in our present state of reduction, emanation. We're dealing with the lower levels now, you know. I mean, take a look at, you know, what we're trying to do here, way down there. See, we're just starting out. We're not even soul conscious, yet alone triadally conscious, yet alone monadically conscious, you know, yet alone supra-monadically conscious in the sea of fire. And we haven't even touched the cosmic astral plane, which is simply like a lower astral plane way down here to some kind of being which includes all that. And who is that? Who's that being? It's the forgotten you. It's really easy to forget who we are when you get into a state of reduction, self-chosen reduction, till you become apparently the tiniest thing that's allowable according to your will. I mean, it could keep on going. One could, in absolute infinity, there's no such thing as the smallest thing. But in a universe there is. And that's because you decide it, you know. The God of the universe decides these things. And every universe will have its own laws, and it's not simply a repetition every time. All of this hinges, of course, on the great idea of the great breath. No universe, universe. No universe, universe. Forever. Now, I know these are some pretty far-out thoughts, and, hey, you know, let's just be a good person and try to contribute something here in the world to the welfare of humanity and the planet, and all of that is true. We've got to do that. And at the same time, if we dare, you know, Master Moria has his book of daring, you know. It's in the Agni Yoga book, and it's just a few pages, around page 9, 10, or 11. It's just a few pages right in the early part, whatever the pages are. The book of daring. And it takes a lot of daring to get into these things. But then I always try to remember this. I hope I do remember it now. He says, and then the least of these turned to the shining stars and said, "Hail, brothers!" And in that salutation of daring, his ego vanished. And isn't that what we're trying to do here? I think so. But, we're just in the early days, and I'm sure the Solar Logos knows a lot more than we do, and on, until we discover that we know a lot more than we do. You know what I mean? The real I, the real we, the real me, whatever, knows a lot more than I do. It seems paradoxical, but that's how it goes, I think. Anything you want to ask, or am I missing anybody here in this? Raz, I got you. And okay, here's Vera. Okay, Vera.
Yes, Michael, my mind is today very challenging. I'm in a very difficult period of time. So my attention today wasn't 100%, but you said something today which was fascinating. It was like the deities, the final test is to create such a heavy stone that he can't lift it. Can you please? So then what happened when he can't lift it?
Well, when the Mahamaya that this God has become vanishes in cyclic time, he's back to heavy lifting. Okay? In other words, in the infinite, the absolutely infinite, and that is such a concept, there are an infinity of infinities in the absolutely infinite. And every time I start to think about it, I just go about crazy, But the absolutely infinite is the sort of inside out of the absolute deity. Now, we're leaving absoluteness out of this altogether. Absoluteness, never a change, forever, 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 the utter otherness. But cyclically comes the acting God. That acting God becomes every universe. And when that acting God looks at itself, it can see two things. It can see homogeneity, which is a reflection of the homogeneity of the absoluteness, or it can see absolute infinitude, that it is. Now, that's about the freest choice that exists. The absolute God looks at itself and says, okay, just freely, this is what this universe is going to be, and I'm going to become it. Then there is a descent into finitude. And in that descent into finitude comes the moment when all of these different finite factors obey the laws of illusion. Now, of course, it's possible to break into the lower worlds, as it were, and lift that stone. But there are laws, and the extended absolute deity sets up a law that in a certain condition, it, in an emanated state, cannot lift that stone. See, I've seen that. I've seen that a lot. I go by a big stone, and I say, I can't budge that thing. Who am I, Now, if I were some stupendous force, I could. But that stupendous force, which is me, which is you, which is every being, has set up the laws in the algorithm. And by those laws, and according to those laws, we must conform. So, there's kind of a joke in that whole thing. It says the infinite becomes finite. That's the punchline.
Yeah.
And the infinite God becomes temporarily finite. Not if you look for the essence. If you look for the essence, it's always going to be tremendous. It's going to be the only thing, the essence. But in terms of the great illusion, the universe, the laws, that God has to obey what he, she, it has created in the archetype. And you conform accordingly. And that's how I see it.
So, like in that paragram, that big thing, step by step, we are in that stone. We are that stone, heavy stone. We are right down there. And there are steps to get out of that heaviness and go back.
To return to essence. The steps
Yes.
to return to the essence that we are. Now, we get sad, depressed, whatever, when we forget that we are the universal essence and more. We get captivated by our form. We have a bad case of mistaken identity, and we think we are this perishable thing that we know just gets wiped away, and it's going to go. It's the law of aggregates. Whatever comes together will go apart. Whatever is aggregated is deaggregated. And we think that our self is going to be deaggregated and then will be annihilated into nothingness, which is probably the greatest existential fear. But rather, there is no deaggregation in that which has never been aggregated, and has no parts, and has no pieces, and is simply the utter otherness of utter being. So aggregations don't exist. In reality, they exist in actuality.
But it's even when we believe, yes, my life cannot be annihilated, I will remain forever, whatever, but still, to get out of my mess, I need to know the wisdom is to know the right step, the right timing, the right method. And so jumping now, how much is possible to jump certain developmental stages? Is it possible?
Well,
Not quite.
I would say that that's why we study the ageless wisdom. And that's
Yes.
why we keep studying the ageless wisdom. So in the relative world, we do it right, and we create the platform on which these higher realizations can occur. But in terms of being surprised by God or surprised by reality or all that, or in terms of having the dragon's eye wink at you, we just don't know. Anything, some kind of lightning bolt of reality can come in. You know how it is at night. You're out there in the dark, and there's a huge storm, and it's dark, and you can't see a thing. And all of a sudden, a shaft of lightning lights up the whole town where before you saw nothing. Now, as far as those interventions of the lightning, we don't know where that will take us. We just have to be alert. That's all. And then we just, we just get knocked back and see a whole new thing, and it will make a difference in our consciousness. I'm remembering DK talking to a guy, one of his disciples, and said, look, you have been so super stimulated during this Wesak festival. Now it's time to assimilate what has happened. Because you just can't go on forever. Stimulation.
Yeah.
The form will give out. So we need the form. And the wisdom is the preservation of the form and in relation to the cause of the form.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Elvira. Okay, friends. Okay. Now, you know, I always get to that point where I say, well, let's see, we got a couple of things here from Damien and Loretta. So, well, thanks, Damien. You know, I just do what I can do here. Wonderful talk, meditation. A squirrel runs on the windowsill with a crabapple. Equals. I think of substance and substance for all. Equals. The more we gather parts of ourselves, the more the isness of life unfolds. Also, when we find ourselves lost in those moments of being, we are tuning in. Now, wait a second. Let me make sure I've got everything correct, because Loretta is here. Okay. I think, no, wait a second. This is Loretta. So, Damien, I thank you for your thought. You know, look, I'm obviously I'm just feeling my way here too. You know, but you know, I had a teacher once, not the Tibetan in this case, but a teacher, and I told you the story. You know, I used to be an artist and a dancer and an opera type and all that, but one day I just deviated and I didn't go to rehearsal. Instead, I met this guy, and everything changed accordingly, because he knew, and he was a great teacher. So I tried to, and I said, what did he teach me? Well, I don't know if at the time I could register it, but I realized it was the road to identification, which, by the way, you know, we were talking about that, and Tui was talking about that in the meditations recently. It's the Royal Road. It's Libra. It's the Shushumna. It's from the base to the crown. It's into Shambhala. It is the achieving the whole pathway from the bottom to the top. You know, it is the eventually the Shambhalic beingness eventually for us and beyond. So I'm very grateful to him, very grateful that one lesson in the 7 years that I studied with him, if I can call it study, more like chance encounters at the university, I learned a little bit about identification. And then I just kept pursuing it, you know what I mean? And then along comes the Tibetan, and then along comes Shankara, who writes the crest jewel of discrimination. You know, this little book, and it's just, well, it's all about fourth initiation stuff, because you've got Mercury and Saturn there, and you're discriminating between the dense physical body of the planetary logos and his etheric body. Now, once you're really into the etheric body of the planetary logos, as the masters are, then the things that we are sometimes in vain trying to talk about are just as obvious as the day, you know. So the day be with us, obvious to their consciousness. So the crest jewel of discrimination, I would strongly recommend it. And then Loretta has been writing this, that I thought it was a continuation. The more the isness of life unfolds also. When we find ourselves lost in those moments of being, we are tuning in to other people who are we tuning into other people who are doing the same thing at that moment? Well, I would say, you know, it might be, but that's not that upon which it is dependent. Of course, there are those, the Tibetan psychic gift waves, as they call it, and when the meditator in the cave, as it were, is reaching out to a vast number of people, he's very much with them, says Moria. Is he alone? No, he's with everyone, even though he's in the cave, and we may be receiving some of those psychic gift waves. But I don't think it's a dependency. I think it's inherently within everyone that being simply is, and we are it, and will recognize that this is us. This is what we are. We can recognize this. And the day will come and say, hey, that's not just a concept. What is this? And then we will have crossed maybe a Rubicon, you know? At that time, you cross that Rubicon, and it's only a matter of time before your form is dead. The assassins will set upon you. You will be the being, rather than a trapped consciousness, trapped in form. So they may be tuning in, and we can tune in on them, or they may not. And can we prolong the moment and, sustain this by breathing into it and releasing expectation? I think those are two good ways of doing it. And everybody has to find their own way of sustaining it. Now, obviously, if the little personality gets anxious and says, oh, I did better yesterday, and oh, why isn't it working today, and all that, that's going to interfere with the sustainment. I think each one of us is going to find a method of sustainment that is his or her own. I find, the heart center is really important here, because, that heart just keeps beating and beating, just keeps beating. The only rest it has is between beats, goes for 60, 70, 80, 90 years. That's an amazing sustainment. And so I find that the heart, see, if I'm looking at two things right now, whatever, let's say people, that might be easier to relate to people at first before you start doing the other kingdoms, but not necessarily. And I've got to try, say I've got two people out there, and I've got my heart center active. That's going to put me into the world of infuception, for me anyway, faster and more thoroughly than maybe another technique. So you find your own technique, what works for you. It's a search. And if something happens to you that is revelatory, then what you try to do is say, how'd that happen? What led to that? And maybe you can identify the steps, and we begin to make a science out of it instead of only an art. It has to be an art and a science, but we bring in the element of predictability, because we found the steps that will reveal. That's what chemistry is all about. You bring this element and that element together, and it's just always working according to the law. It produces this molecule, So we have to see what will always work, and under the given laws that we have. Remember, we've created these laws, we've become these laws, and the emanations that we have sent forth, or that the One has sent forth, have to obey those laws. So, okay, breathing into it, whatever works for you there, Loretta, you have your own feeling about what that is, and the releasing of expectation. I think we can relate to that, because who is it that expects? See, the trouble with expecting is that there's something else there that is dualistic that's doing the expecting. So, obviously you've thrown yourself into a condition of two or more, and that's working in the opposite direction of what you want. DK once describes what this oneness is not. And I can't, it's somewhere there in Rays and Initiations. And he talks about it. It doesn't mean that I am at one with this. It's something much more homogeneous. But, we're all on our way finding the things that work, and let everybody build his or her antakarana. Let's find the things that work, for us, because there's just no one that's going to be able to come along and tell you absolutely what's going to work for you. Maybe a master can do that, and so forth. But he will also ask you, how much of the mountain of vision have you climbed for yourself? That struck me when I read that from DK. And I said, well, so okay. So then I began to resolve that, okay, I would climb, if I could, this mountain of vision by myself, meaning using my own methods, as everyone must do it. And then at the top, all methods are one. Okay, crest jewel of discrimination. Crest jewel of discrimination. Michael. Crest jewel of or let me misspell the Hindu here, Viveka, which means discrimination, Kuda Mani. Viveka Kuda, I'm misspelling, M-A-N-N-I, or two words, Viveka Kudamani. It's either two words here, Kudamani, or Viveka Kudamani. If I could go digging in my, oh boy, it's somewhere there, but I can't leave, and I'll show you this ratty little book. It's only this big, but it was the complete, for me, inspiration for my Infinity book. So, Viveka Kudamani. And DK had a special, excuse me, translation. Was it, the man's name began with a J. And I'm not sure, was it one of those presidents of the Theosophical Society? Was it Janarajadasa, or was it someone else? Anyway, the book that I worked with wasn't that one at all. And I developed a preference for the little book that I was using. So utterly simple, The Buddha and the Shankaracharya are said to be the two halves of one whole. And what I have found about them is the Buddha was very practical. And basically he taught things that had immediate applicability. And it doesn't mean he didn't know all those other things. He did, of course, but he said this is the best way to go. I don't know the astrology of Shankara. I don't know if anybody does. He died at the age of 32. He just founded all these monasteries and all that, and he just conscious exit, But he was somehow more, I don't know if I should call it philosophical. He dealt with the main principle of recognizing the one and identifying as that one. So naturally, I had a very great affinity for that. And that was almost 30 years ago that I ran into that book. Shankara's crest jewel of discrimination. That's it. Exactly. Well, can we study all these things and the Tibetan simultaneously? And it does give us multiple ways to approach reality. I think we all want reality, don't we? I don't even know what I've got here, but somewhere I have something about what we all want. I'm not even sure it's true. Maybe it's me just supposing what we all want. In the utter depths of ourselves, we want to understand that we pervade all possible perceptions as the reality from which those perceptions arose. Everything that has ever become has come out of us as one being. That's who you are, that one reality. Now, everything is so divided down here that it's hard to see that. We are the one reality. In the utter depths of ourselves, we want to be every possible self-perception within utterly articulated absolute infinitude, and as well, here's what I should say, the no thing at all. So in other words, there's this longing that's in us, and it comes from what we really are, and the longing is to be what we really are, which is every possible thing in absolute infinitude. I mean, it's mind-boggling, of course, as well as absoluteness itself. Any overly lengthy exposure to finitude, finiteness, creates a rebellion in the spirit. At least I have found it. I think so. So that's why, fortunately, the whole thing is cyclic, and universes are cyclic, and the only really finite condition that exists is the universe and everything in it. Finite, but not in essence. The essence of it is real and infinite, but and absolute, but the form is finite. I don't know, maybe I'll read one more here. I was going to read these out a little bit to you. We're going to get into some of this stuff. In the utter depths of ourselves, now, right, there's my word, utter. I just couldn't find any word but utter to just max out what it is, It just doesn't leave room for anything else, and there isn't anything else. In the utter depths of ourselves, we want to realize ourselves as the only one, or the zero, that is forever. Now, maybe I should put here the only one, or absolute zero, which has nothing to do with temperature, except maybe all vibration ceases in absolute zero, and there's certainly no vibration in absoluteness. We want to realize ourselves as the only one / absolute zero that is forever, and yet play the role in universal Mahamaya of the, and here's my, little symbol for absolute infinitesimal. If I was to get rid of, see, look, let me show you. If I copy this thing, and suppose I do this, and get rid of the line through the infinity sign, watch what happens. There it is. So this symbol, and I'll get into this, I don't know in what order, but this is the absolute infinitesimal. It's got a line through the infinity. And this is absolute infinity. It has no line. So we, and yet play a role in universal illusion, in universal Mahamaya, the absolute infinitesimal, seemingly the very opposite of the only, or the only one. So, you know, we are absolute, and we periodically want to become finite, or think we are finite, in order to remain absolute. So, you know, finiteness is part of absoluteness, is what I'm saying. We cannot, you know, like Blavatsky said, this absoluteness is beyond any the range of any human thought whatsoever. And human understanding. It's just beyond, you know, beyond. And I actually think, and sometimes it seems a preposterous thing to say, that there is no being in the universe who understands it. Now, I know that that seems like a big stretch. No being in the universe who understands the absolute. But what I want to say is the lesser, in a way, does not contain the greater, not in the normal sense. And when you compare any being in the universe, even the universal logos, to absolute infinity, absolute infinitude, that being becomes the tiniest of things. It becomes the absolute infinitesimal. No matter how large or great it seems to be, a galaxy, a family of galaxies, anything, even the whole universal logos and its universe, it shrinks down into a next to nothingness. And I'm going to deal with that as we go along. You know, this is a big stretch, I know it. And I'm stretching myself all the time here. And I'm, you know, wondering, is it worth the stretch? But this is a letter I sent you some time ago, and I just thought I'd go over it a little bit, and maybe next time. And this is, today is the 15th. If you haven't paid your income tax today, you're too late. This is it. Okay. All right, so this is 15th of October, and that year, 2019. But I have to be careful because this is like very rich food. And if you go through too much of it at once, it's like overeating very rich food. And, you know, you can get sick on it, and you can just become satiated and rebel against it. You know, DK talks about rebellion against study. Can these dry bones live? He says. So anyway, I don't overdo it. I try not to overdo it. Probably some of you think I am overdoing it, but you can only go so far and hope for some kind of assimilation. Otherwise, it just becomes too much to bear. But believe me, we're going to bear it, and it will dawn on us, and realization will come. And even though we may never, while the universe exists, understand, is that a word? Understand absoluteness, we're getting closer all the time as we move back again into the fullness of the great universal being which we are. Okay, so except for any questions that may have come up here, let's see, I don't know if let me take a look over here. Yeah, okay. Are there any other things you'd like to say, ask, whatever. You know, I never say I know the answer, but I mean, I always give it a try, and at least to point in the right direction. We're on our way, you know, and then we've never left either. Paradox after paradox, paradox after paradox. You know, when we're told we can never name this thing, so being like I am, I came up with 241 names for it. And, you know, I suppose it's an act of hubris or something. But I called it the Great Paradox. And I think it just shatters the human mind as usually the human mind works. And then maybe gives us a new way for the mind to work and a new way to experience. See, it's not that we have to think everything. It's the experience of these higher states that's more important by far than naming this concept and this relation and that structure. That's all well and good. But if it doesn't lead to the experience, I call it the inperience, whatever, then it hasn't gone far enough, you see. And in this series of explorations, what we're looking for is the experience of some of these states which nobody even thinks exist. That's the goal. And I've got some things to say about it and some questions to ask you. If I could just stop talking long enough. I tell you what, I'm not going to do this right now, okay? I only have 5 questions here. But it's on eliminating boundaries. And there's a little exercise here, kind of a meditation. Maybe I'll take that up the next time that we meet. I would just say this. Use your creative imagination a lot when you're trying to enter into these things. You know, like Einstein, it was a 3rd-rate, 5th-rate thing he did, but he just imagined himself riding on a light beam. He had some kinds of thought experiments that he was undertaking. And without that imagination, he was a Pisces, okay, it's an imaginative sign. With Cancer rising, Neptune was very strong for him, you know. But without these imaginations, you just might not arrive at all. You might not penetrate anything. So the imagination is very, very useful when it comes to feeling these things, or these non-things, which are the formlessness underlying the form. Okay, I think I've said enough here. Is there any final statement anybody wants to make, or any final question? Because I think, you know, I'll end our work here today on a more familiar note. And here is Damien. And you're self-muted, Damien. There you go.
Hi, Michael.
Hi.
I was just thinking what you were saying about identification, right, which I've been practicing on and off, and beingness. Now, at times, I feel like I go somewhere and it's just empty. This is the only way I can describe, like empty space. And then I actually feel myself coming back down. Now, it only happens a few times. But every time that happens, it brings up anger. And I was just wondering.
Because we want it, we want it. We, the personality, we want this ultimateness. And like someone said earlier, and maybe it was Loretta or someone, if we try too hard, that was the gist of it, we're going to get in our own way. But then, when you use words like emptiness, you're pretty close to the Buddhist void. And that void is not really a void. It's a void of form, but it's so close to this beingness that we're pursuing that to have the sense of perception of the void is, already we're in the right place, okay? And then of course we're going to descend into our incompletely regenerated personalities. And it's just okay, it just goes with it. And I've had, for myself, so much disappointment. One day everything is crystal clear, and the next day I can't get it. And or then it'll surprise me, and I'll be happy about that, and it'll be okay. So just, it's a journey, and we just take it as it comes. The masters have isolated unity. It characterizes the fifth degree, right? And isolated unity, what is that? In the midst of all diversity, their perception isolates the unity. And that is always perceived, or I say infusive, even with all the variety, because the masters are practical people and they work down here just fine. But, okay, I get angry at myself when I lose it, when I lose the thread. But then I know that my anger, that's not going to get me there, so I go back and try again, and then if it doesn't work on a particular day that I'm working on it, then okay, tomorrow's another day in this relative world, and I know it's going to get better and better, and the oneness is going to be more dominating constantly, without necessarily completely obliterating the variety. That's the trick. I mean, you can be in those states where all variety is obliterated, but we've got a lot to do in the relative world, and so we have to sustain both simultaneously. Okay, thank you. And Damien, are you there? Oopsie. Yeah, you are. Okay, well, we got you there, and thank you for your sharing. Okay, friends, now let's just, it's almost 2 hours here, and, is that overloaded? I don't know. But let's do something more familiar. Just have to find it, right? And it should be right here, but it's not. So I'll find it. Just a second. Let's come down to earth a little bit and say together, internally or externally, the great invocation. And then, I'll convert this and I'll send this to Joe and to BL and so forth, and it'll be listed up there on Makara. And I've asked another one of my colleagues to start getting these things on YouTube, and should be accessible. And if you have any friends who might be interested in these subjects, let them know, please, that it does exist. And we can talk about these things, experience these things, and get closer to the center, which is the essence, which is always the same. As it's Libra, everything equals everything else, in Libra. Okay, here we go. From the point of light within the mind of God, let light stream forth into the minds of men. Let light descend on earth. From the point of love within the heart of God, let love stream forth into the hearts of men. May Christ return to earth. From the center where the will of God is known, let purpose guide the little wills of men, the purpose which the masters know and serve. From the center which we call the race of men, let the plan of love and light work out, and may it seal the door where evil dwells. Let light and love and power restore the plan on earth. Friends, thank you for coming, and tomorrow morning we'll get into the science of triangles in that great book, Esoteric Astrology, and that will be at 5 a.m. GMT, 8 o'clock here in Finland. So a few hours remain for all of us, and if you'd like to join us, I think here is Joe having shown in the chat box the link for this particular webinar. And then at night, 5 p.m. to you, will offer the normal triangles meditation, which is on the practical level as the Tibetan has given it to us. And then we continue with the evening schedule during this week. And I'm really trying to work something out with Cosmic Fire, so, there's not excessive overload, and I'll try to get that to you somehow as soon as a decision is made about it. Now, meanwhile, you can go to Makara. We've had one or maybe two meetings, I don't know, maybe just one meeting in Cosmic Fire where we all talked, and then I've done 4 consecutive programs after that where I'm just giving you my impression, but you might get something out of it. So we'll let you know, okay? All right, lots of love and many blessings from the whole team, and let's just keep on keeping on, as they say in the arcane school. Just keep on keeping on. Okay. We'll talk to you before long. Bye-bye.